You know this painting, and everyone knows this painting, and it has been stolen twice. It has been attacked with acid. It has had a rock thrown at it. It has been reproduced more times than any other image in human history. It hangs behind bulletproof glass in a climate-controlled room in the Louvre, surrounded every day by crowds so dense that most people never get closer than 15 feet from it. And almost nobody who looks at it knows what they are actually looking at. Three things about the Mona Lisa are almost never mentioned. The first is that nobody knows who she is. The second is that her smile disappears when you look directly at it. And the third is that the most likely answer to the first question, the most historically and scientifically supported theory about who the Mona Lisa actually is that she is Leonardo da Vinci himself. Let's start with what we think we know. The official identification of the Mona Lisa is Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. Leonardo began the painting around 1503, when Lisa would have been in her mid-20s. The painting was commissioned to celebrate the birth of their second son. This identification was not confirmed until 2005, when a scholar named Armin Schlechter discovered a marginal note in a copy of a book owned by Agostino Vespucci, a Florentine official who knew Leonardo, written in 1503, identifying the subject of the painting as Lisa del Giocondo. 500 years. One marginal note. That is the entire evidentiary basis for the most famous portrait in the world. But the marginal note only tells us who Leonardo said he was painting in 1503. It does not tell us who the finished painting actually depicts. Because the Mona Lisa Leonardo delivered, or rather never delivered since he kept it until his death, is not the same painting described in 1503. Leonardo worked on the Mona Lisa for at least 4 years, possibly longer. He kept revising it. He took it with him when he left Florence, when he moved to Milan, when he relocated to France at the invitation of the French king. He never gave it to Francesco del Giocondo. He died in France in 1519 with it still in his possession. Why would a commissioned portrait of a merchant's wife remain in the painter's personal collection for 16 years? Why would Leonardo, who sold paintings, who needed money, who had a practical relationship with patronage throughout his career, refuse to deliver a painting he had been paid to make? Unless it was no longer simply a portrait of someone else. Unless it had become something else entirely. In 1984, a computer graphics researcher named Lillian Schwartz at Bell Labs in New Jersey was working on a digital analysis of Leonardo's drawings and paintings. She had access to the most advanced image processing technology of the time. She took the Mona Lisa and she took Leonardo's red chalk self-portrait from around 1512, the only image we have of Leonardo's own face, and she aligned them. The eyes matched, the nose matched, the forehead matched, the jawline matched. The proportions of the face matched with a precision that exceeded what you would expect from coincidence. The Mona Lisa and Leonardo da Vinci's self-portrait are, according to Schwartz's analysis, the same face. Not approximately, not metaphorically. The same specific facial structure, the same proportions, the same geometry. One rendered as a bearded old man in red chalk and one rendered as a woman in her 20s in oil on poplar wood. Schwartz's conclusion was that the Mona Lisa was Leonardo's self-portrait in feminine form. This is not as strange as it sounds. Leonardo was, by every historical account, a man who defied the conventional categories of his time. He was illegitimate, which excluded him from many of the social structures that defined a Florentine man's life. He was almost certainly homosexual. His closest relationships were with his male assistants, particularly a young man named Gian Giacomo Caprotti, known as Salai, who lived with him for nearly 30 years. He was also, as a scientist and anatomist, deeply interested in the relationship between male and female form. His anatomical drawings explore the body without the moral hierarchy that would have organized most of his contemporaries' thinking about gender. He drew the male and female body with the same curiosity, the same precision, the same refusal to assign greater value to one form over the other. and he was fascinated throughout his career by the sfumato technique, the soft dissolving of edges, the refusal of sharp definitions, the deliberate ambiguity between one thing and another. The Mona Lisa is the supreme expression of that ambiguity. She is not fully readable as any single thing. Her landscape is geologically impossible. The two sides of the background don't match, suggesting she exists in a space that is not a real place. Her hands are still and folded, but her expression is alive. Her smile appears and disappears. She is in every sense a figure who refuses to be fixed. And about that smile, the smile of the Mona Lisa is one of the most analyzed, most written about, most discussed features in the history of art. It has been described as mysterious, enigmatic, knowing, ambiguous, teasing, sad, content, ironic, but there is a specific scientific explanation for why it seems to change, why it appears to smile when you're not looking directly at it and to stop smiling when you are. The human eye has two types of photoreceptors. The cones, concentrated in the center of the retina, process fine detail and color in direct light. The rods, concentrated in the periphery, are more sensitive to contrast and movement, but less precise. When you look directly at the Mona Lisa's mouth, your cones process what is there, a subtle, ambiguous curve that could be read as a slight smile or as a neutral expression. But when you look at her eyes or at another part of the painting, your peripheral vision, your rods, processes her mouth differently. The rods are more sensitive to the shadows under her cheekbones and at the corners of her mouth, those shadows read as a smile. So the smile is literally there and not there depending on which part of your visual system is processing it. Leonardo knew this. He had spent years dissecting human eyes. He had studied the anatomy of vision with the same obsessive precision he brought to everything else. He understood that the center and the periphery of the eye process light differently. He painted the smile in sfumato, in soft, dissolving shadow, specifically so that it would register in peripheral vision but disappear under direct scrutiny. The smile was designed to disappear when you look for it. Now put these three things together. A painting that was supposedly commissioned as a portrait of a merchant's wife but was never delivered. A face that matches, with extraordinary precision, Leonardo's own facial structure. A smile that was engineered, with anatomical precision, to be impossible to look at directly. What kind of painting disappears when you look at it too hard? What kind of portrait keeps its identity hidden? What kind of image shows you exactly what it is and makes it impossible to confirm? Leonardo da Vinci, the man who encoded heresies in the walls of convents, who dissected 30 bodies in secret, who designed weapons and flying machines and hydraulic systems in notebooks written in mirror script so nobody could read them over his shoulder, painted a portrait that has been staring at the world for 500 years. And nobody, for most of that time, knew whose face it was. The painting arrived in France in 1516, when Leonardo accepted an invitation from King Francis I and moved to the Château du Clos-Lucé near Amboise. He brought 3 paintings with him. The Mona Lisa was one of them. He died there on May 2, 1519. He was 67 years old. Francis I was with him, or so the legend says, holding his head as he died. The painting passed to the French crown. It hung in the Palace of Fontainebleau, then in Versailles. Then Napoleon took it to his bedroom. Eventually, it ended up in the Louvre, where it has been ever since, behind bulletproof glass, surrounded by crowds, photographed millions of times by people who hold up their phones and take a picture and move on before they have had time to look at it. The most visited painting in the world, the least seen. The next time you see the Mona Lisa in a reproduction in a museum on a phone screen, do something simple. Look at her eyes. Then let your gaze drift to the corners of her mouth without looking directly at them. Watch the smile appear. Then look directly at her mouth. Watch it disappear. And ask yourself who designed a smile that vanishes when you try to find it. Who painted a face that matches his own? who spent 16 years refusing to give away a painting that was supposedly made for someone else. Leonardo da Vinci looked at you through this painting for 500 years. He just made sure you couldn't be certain it was him. If this changed the way you see the most famous painting in the world, share it with someone who thinks they already know what the Mona Lisa is. And if you want to go deeper into the artists, the secrets, and the masterpieces that contain the truths we were never supposed to find, subscribe to Hidden Canvas. She was never just a smile.